On Saturday, Kenya Airways pilots made good on their threats and went on strike. The industrial action extended into Sunday, causing further flight cancellations. The airline has warned of disciplinary action against any pilot that participates. The Kenya Airline Pilots Association is defying a court order not to strike, and the pilots are demanding a raise in wages, the reinstatement of contributions to a provident fund, and payment of all salaries stopped during the COVID-19 pandemic. The airline's managing director and CEO, Alan Kalavuka, has urged the protesting pilots, who make up 10% of the workforce, to return to work by 10:30 a.m. on Sunday. But that did not happen. The Pilots Association says its members would remain on strike until their voice is heard. We've been following this situation very closely with aviation consultant Sean Mendis. He joins me again now from Blantyre, Malawi. Sean, we've watched this conversation and this situation develop over the past week. We've talked about it in the past week 2 times already, but now the strike is in effect. It's happening. Let's just confirm right now. Started on Saturday. Are the pilots still currently on strike as of Monday morning?
As of Monday morning, the strike is still ongoing, and well, just a tiny handful of Kenya Airways flights have been able to operate since Saturday.
And so what the Pilots Association had said is that there would be no Kenya Airways flight that would take off with the Kenya Airlines Pilot Association pilots flying the plane. Were there no attempts at any last-minute negotiations, or did the government and the airline really think they had this in the bag with that court order?
I think it's a combination of both. There were last-minute negotiations all night Friday, from what I understand, but it was between the Transport Ministry and the pilots on one hand. The pilots have been refusing to come to the table to negotiate with Kenya Airways from the statements that they are making until their demands are met. They view those as a precondition to resuming work, rather than as a point where they can actually engage in negotiations. So it's a bit of a hardline stance from them. And of course, Kenya Airways themselves are taking the position that since the pilots have defied the court order, they are now engaging in an illegal strike. And as of yesterday, based on the statements that Alan Kilavuka has made, they are commencing disciplinary action against the pilots who have failed to show up for their rostered flights. So, you know, both sides are escalating the issue rather than seeking to de-escalate it. And, you know, the government's attempts at trying to mediate have also fallen flat on Friday night, as well as, you know, through the weekend.
All right, so we're going to take some sound bites from one of those who is involved. This is larger than just Kenya Airways, of course, also affecting Kenya's aviation space. So let's hear what a representative of one of the unions has to say.
We worked tirelessly throughout last night and shared our revised proposals with Kenya Airways management. Until now, we're yet to hear back from them. This once again demonstrates that it is Kenya Airways management's failure that has gotten us to this point.
We respect the views and the concerns of the pilots. We believe they went about it the wrong way, and the company and the government of Kenya is willing to listen to the issues they are raising.
I think that the least respectful thing KQ could have done to its passengers was to at least send us an email to notify us of this. I check out of my hotel room, I get to the airport, and all they do is brandish this paper in front of me. I call back to the hotel and there's no accommodation. And I've been standing here for 3 hours. Is that how you work?
So we'll get to what Kenya Airways legally has to do for its customers and its passengers. But let's pick up. You've said that right now both parties seem to be at a point where they're escalating the situation. Kenya Airways is a public-private partnership majorly owned by the government of Kenya, which right now says they respect their right to strike, but they've gone about it the wrong way. It's been 2 days now. How has this strike impacted KQ and, of course, the larger Kenya airspace in terms of aviation and the industry?
Well, with KQ, it is quickly escalating to a point where it might be a fatal blow to them. Prior to the strike, they estimated that they would be losing about $2.5 million a day, because of the strike. So the longer that this drags out, their meager cash reserves, which were just beginning to build up again after COVID, will be significantly affected. There were over 10,000 passengers stranded in Nairobi. which they have to find hotel accommodation, rebook them on other airlines. They've run out of hotels to be able to put people in Nairobi. Other airlines are putting in larger aircraft into Nairobi where possible to be able to help out Kenya Airways. But there is a limit to what you can do. Kenya Airways was around half the total amount of traffic at Nairobi airport anyway. Domestically, it's not so bad because their subsidiary Jambo Jet is able to pick up a lot of passengers on routes to Mombasa and the like. So, the domestic traveler is still has some options available. But internationally, and especially for passengers who are just connecting through Nairobi, say a passenger going from Johannesburg to London or similar, those passengers are now stuck in Nairobi because they're landed on Saturday morning and their onward connection flights were cancelled, and they're the ones who Kenya Airways has really got to find a solution to, because as the person you spoke to over there said, this was a very much a hope that this strike would not go ahead on Saturday, but then when it did on Saturday morning, it was very much a last-minute thing where people were caught, with their pants down, effectively.
And this strike we're hearing now is affecting some 9,000 passengers, hundreds of flights as it may be, and we don't have an idea as to how long it may be. But in terms of the responsibilities that KQ has to its customers and passengers, we heard from the gentleman there who said he would have liked a good warning to find out whether he gets to the airport and he's been standing 3 hours, he has a piece of paper. What are the actual legal sort of responsibilities that KQ has to passengers? It'd be interesting to see that, because there's also the conversation around reimbursements. If it's costing around 2.5 every day, what about the money that may have to be refunded? Where do we put that?
Well, exactly. That's where, as I said, the longer the strike drags out, the less likely that there will actually be a resolution possible. Because as Kenya Airways goes deeper and deeper into the red, the only way that airline could survive is if the shareholder puts more money into it. And the government has been pretty clear at this point that other than the guaranteed loans which they've inherited, they really have no wish to just basically throw good money after bad. So the longer the strike drags on, the less likely it is that Kenya Airways will even survive and come out of it as a solvent and functioning entity. The passengers. From a passenger's perspective, the advice I'd have to passengers, in fact, I've spoken to a couple of people who are stuck in Kenya right now, is try and get yourselves a ticket in another airline, because this does not look like, even if the pilots come back to work, there's going to be a backlog of passengers. And, if you need to get somewhere, relying on this strike to resolve itself is not going to be the answer. If the strike gets resolved and, and Kenya Airways continues to operate, yes, you will be able to probably get reimbursements and refunds and so forth for your ticket costs, but your incidental expenses like hotels and the like, at best you can hope to get some sort of token compensation like a flight voucher or the like from them, but the likelihood of being made whole from a situation like that is very low right now. So passengers probably need to take matters into their own hand and seek their own solutions.
All right, so I want to go back to what was on the screen just now, and that was tweets from the official handle of the Kenya Airways Pilots Association. And they talked about the fact that they believe the management is seemingly not at all bothered about resolving. You've talked about that. It seems both sides are, of course, escalating this. But the second part of the tweet did mention something interesting, and I want to get your thoughts on that, Sean. He said that, or whoever tweeted on behalf of the association says, they would rather take the Kenya Airways business to Ethiopia. We are continually vindicated that the ego of the KQ management that will lead to the death of the airline. Two things here. Taking the Kenya Airways business to Ethiopia. What's that about? Is that even a potential scenario in this situation?
I think that is largely rhetoric from, obviously from a union. But yes, I mean, the biggest beneficiary if Kenya Airways were to shut down is undoubtedly going to be Ethiopian Airlines. Ethiopia obviously neighbors Kenya. Ethiopian Airlines and Kenya Airways are in constant battle for dominance in the East African and Southern African regions. And if Kenya Airways were to shut down, it's likely to be Ethiopian Airlines and Ethiopia in general, which will be a significant beneficiary. However, I'd also like to point back out that that's not something that the actions of management are necessarily contributing to. That is the market dynamics as it stands. It's not as though management in Kenya Airways has gotten into a secret pact with Ethiopian Airlines to try and ground Kenya Airways and bankrupt it. That I can pretty much definitively assure you that that is not the case. It may be an unwanted side effect of it, but as it stands right now, nobody is winning from the current stalemate.
All right, so let's pick up on the other sort of allegation or insinuation that's there regarding KQ management, and you've mentioned that. In the conversations we had last week, you did give the CEO and managing director some amount of props for his attempts at restructuring and recovery, even though this is an airline that has not posted any profit in 10 years. Now, the pilots make up 10% of the airline's workforce. So first on this, Kalavuka has said that any pilot that participates will face disciplinary action. What do we believe that will be? Also keeping in mind that they were already trying to reduce their workforce anyway. In a way, does this sort of play into the attempt that they would have made? Would they just use this as an opportunity to possibly clear house?
Well, in terms of what will it mean in terms of disciplinary action, I think we've seen that in the past. Kenya Airways has not hesitated over the last year and a half, that when especially the union leadership steps out of line and does anything in violation of the collective bargaining agreement, that they've pursued disciplinary action up to dismissal against union leaders. So I think it's pretty clear from Alan's side. He's been open in the media about this as well, that the ringleaders of this, those who are causing the biggest issue, he will pursue disciplinary and dismissal against them if needed. Can Kenya Airways afford to dismiss 400 pilots and start from scratch again? Well, not if they intend to continue operating in the even remotely in the form that they currently are. You can't hire 400 people from the street and say, wow, you're now a pilot. These pilots are experienced, they're trained. You can't, you can't get that from scratch again. They have options, of course. They do have a subsidiary, Jumbo Jet, which presently is unaffected by the strike. They could look to restructure themselves entirely as a regional operator using Jumbo Jet as a vehicle to do that. And just let the Kenya Airways entity go wherever the industrial action takes it. So the options are there. None of them are a particularly good option. The only real option that is quickly closing is for a negotiated resolution here. But unfortunately, as I said earlier, both sides seems to be more keen on spreading rhetoric and escalating the situation than they are to de-escalate, coming together and finding some sort of conciliatory common position whereby they could get the planes back up in the air and get the passengers moving again.
Knowing what we know about the airline, knowing, of course, that it is at the point it is in its financial journey, recovery, restructuring, reworking leases, already looking to scale back on its workforce, can KQ give the pilots what they're actually asking for? Do you think the company has it within itself, within its funds, within its future plans to actually accede to the demands of the union?
Can KQ actually do what the pilots are asking right now? No, they can't. They simply don't have the money to make an immediate contribution of, what's basically 2 years of back salaries and Provident Fund contributions. They simply don't have that cash in hand. That cash is committed to operating expenses, to leases, and to other, financial commitments that are coming up there. So it is, it's a pipe dream in terms of getting that there. Can they do it in the long term? Well, they've already started repaying back salaries for some work groups over the last few months, so that has commenced. One of the positions just before the strike taken by the Kenya Airways chairman was that they would resume Provident Fund contributions in January of 2023. That was unacceptable to the pilots. Their position maintains that they want to see the entire Provident Fund contributions made now, or at least a start being made now to replenishing those Provident Fund contributions before they're even willing to discuss any of the other items. So, as I said, it is a stalemate. It's not something that Kenya Airways can really solve right now. It doesn't just affect the pilots. If Kenya Airways were to start making contributions just to the pilots, who incidentally are the highest paid work group in the company. So it's not as though that, the pilots are bearing a disproportionate share of the hurt. Every work group has borne the hurt. It's just that the pilots are, well, the most critical labor group that can ground the airline at this point of time, and they have gone ahead and done that.
And right now we know the airline is grounded, but what do we know in terms of how long? When you look at everything that's happening, the statements as well, even would say the body language of those as well involved, the Pilots Association, Alan Kilavuka, the CEO and Managing Director, do you think this is going to go on till the end of the week? Are we looking at just indefinite at this point in time? Or will we see something happen in the next day or two that make sure that KQ can get back into the airline, into the airways soon?
The pilots are playing high-stakes poker over here. They are gambling on the fact that the government, especially the new government, is unwilling to let this airline fail and therefore will step in with a financial bailout that they could benefit from, and potentially other work groups could also benefit from. The government, judging by their statements over the last few days, is not going to do that, in which case the longer the strike drags out, as I said, the only possible and plausible outcome is going to be grounding and permanent liquidation of Kenya Airways. So I'd say it's about 50-50 right now. The longer that the strike drags out, the less likely the odds are that Kenya Airways will survive this.
All right, Sean, thank you so much. We saw you twice last week. You've seen you at the beginning of this week. Maybe sometime this week we'll see you again as well. Same topic, different day, but hopefully with good news. Very true. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks.
And it is one of Africa's, or rather it was one of Africa's premier airlines, the pride of the continent. But in the past several years, things have changed. For the past 10 years, KQ, known always as Kenya Airways, has not posted a profit. And now pilots are saying that they must get back pay. There must be money that's put back into the Provident Fund as well. And they want one or two other things. Right now, we know that flights are grounded with this association, just one or two possibly with pilots not part of this association being able to take off. Some 9,000 passengers are also affected. And the price for this all is about $2.5 million per day. We'll watch this very closely to see how it develops. And there are a few people who should be involved. Kenya Airways is majorly owned by the Kenya government. New President William Ruto has this right on his desk. Will he be able to step in and give a resolution? We'll see how it plays out. You're watching Business Edge. When we come back, top of our international business news is, of course, COP27, which is kicking off, and some interesting news coming from the head of the IMF. And from there, we're also moving into West Africa. Ghana is facing times, and thousands of protesters are saying the president must go.